February 1945. German guards searched Colditz Castle for tunnels, while directly above them, prisoners were secretly building an airplane. The machine had wooden wings, fabric skin, and enough space for 2 men, but no door large enough to remove it. If the guards discovered the workshop, months of work would vanish, and the builders could face far worse than ordinary punishment. So every hammer tap, every cut, and every whispered calculation had to disappear beneath the normal sounds of prison life. The strangest part was not that prisoners imagined flying away. It was that their impossible aircraft might actually have worked. Colditz stood high above the River Mulde, surrounded by steep drops, walls, wire, armed sentries, and the town below. Germany sent difficult Allied officers there, especially men who had escaped before or were considered likely to try again. That decision created an unusual problem. The castle concentrated experienced escapers, engineers, pilots, forgers, tailors, and determined troublemakers together. Prisoners tried disguises, tunnels, ropes, hidden compartments, and forged papers, but every failed attempt taught the guards something new. By late 1944, escaping through the castle itself seemed harder than ever, so Tony Rolt began looking above it. From certain positions, the chapel roof was hidden from German sentries, while open countryside waited beyond the river below. Rolt imagined a glider launching from that roof, crossing the Mulde, and landing safely outside the immediate prison perimeter. The idea sounded absurd, but 2 prisoners understood aviation well enough to test whether absurd truly still meant impossible. Bill Goldfinch and Jack Best began calculating weight, lift, balance, speed, and the distance required before the roof simply ended. They found aviation books inside the prison library and turned an escape fantasy into measurements that could survive serious examination. The chosen workshop was an attic above the chapel, a place guards rarely searched because tunnels normally went downward, not upward. Prisoners built a false wall across part of the attic, creating a hidden room inside a building already filled with secrets. From outside, the barrier looked like neglected masonry. Behind it, wood, tools, drawings, and aircraft sections slowly began accumulating. Lookouts watched corridors and stairways, ready to signal whenever guards approached the chapel or climbed toward the upper floors. The builders even arranged a warning system, because one unexpected inspection could expose both the glider and everyone supporting it. Nothing inside the workshop came from an aircraft factory. Nearly every useful object had to be stolen, traded, or transformed. Bed slats became ribs. Floorboards became stronger structural pieces. Electrical wire was taken for controls hidden inside the future wings. Improvised saw blades came from gramophone springs, while simple handles and frames were shaped from whatever wood and metal appeared. Every missing board created another risk, because guards might notice furniture, flooring, or fittings becoming smaller throughout the castle. So prisoners removed materials gradually, spreading the theft across rooms and weeks, until no single disappearance seemed important enough. The glider could not be built as one complete machine, because the hidden attic was too cramped and exits were too narrow. Instead, Goldfinch, Best, and their helpers constructed separate sections designed to join together carefully on the roof before the planned launch. Each wing required repeated ribs with matching curves, meaning tiny measurement errors could become dangerous once the aircraft carried 2 men. Prison sleeping fabric covered the wooden frame, creating a light skin that still needed sealing before it could hold airflow. The builders reportedly used cooked millet from prison rations as a primitive coating, turning food into part of an aircraft. Yet building wings was only half the problem. A glider cannot climb from a rooftop unless it first gains enough speed. The prisoners planned a runway made from tables, assembled across the chapel roof only when the escape was ready. A heavy metal bathtub loaded with weight would drop down the outside wall and pull the glider through pulleys. In theory, the falling bathtub would accelerate the aircraft toward takeoff speed before the wooden runway abruptly disappeared beneath it. 2 men would then sail across the river, land in a meadow, and begin an even more dangerous journey through Germany. The calculations were checked repeatedly, because courage could not compensate for a wing that stalled immediately beyond the castle wall. Lorne Welch, an experienced glider pilot among the prisoners, reviewed the design and challenged weaknesses before construction advanced further. The finished aircraft was intended to weigh roughly 240 pounds, remarkably light for a handmade 2-seat glider. Its wings stretched about 32 feet, far wider than the secret room where much of the structure was created. That meant final assembly could happen only near launch, under darkness, with tables, ropes, controls, and wings moved into position. As winter ended, the builders could hear the war approaching, and the purpose of the glider began quietly changing. Escaping remained possible, but prisoners also feared what might happen if SS forces arrived before Allied soldiers reached Colditz. The aircraft could carry 2 men beyond the castle, allowing them to warn approaching troops if the prisoners faced immediate danger. That possibility gave the unfinished machine a darker urgency. It was no longer merely a brilliant answer to boredom. Inside the attic, the wings neared completion, while distant artillery suggested freedom might arrive before the glider ever launched. Then came the final problem no engineer could solve: timing. Every additional day improved the aircraft but shortened the war. American forces entered Colditz in April 1945, freeing the prisoners before the rooftop runway, pulley system, and launch could be completed. The hidden wall was opened, and the aircraft sections finally emerged from the attic where guards had never discovered them. A war correspondent photographed the strange machine, preserving evidence of an escape plan that remained suspended between genius and madness. The original glider never flew, and its later fate became uncertain as Colditz passed into the Soviet occupation zone. Decades later, builders used surviving plans to create replicas and test whether the prisoners had designed a genuine aircraft. A full-sized reconstruction successfully flew, suggesting Goldfinch, Best, and their secret workshop had produced far more than a desperate fantasy. Another unmanned recreation later launched from Colditz itself, crossed the river, and landed beyond the castle as originally imagined. That does not prove the prisoners would have escaped Germany, because landing safely would have been only their first challenge. But it proves the most unbelievable part was possible. Men inside an escape-proof castle had secretly built a machine capable of flight. Colditz was designed to contain people who refused to stop escaping, yet that concentration gave them knowledge no ordinary prison expected. The guards searched cells, floors, walls, and tunnels, while the largest escape device in Colditz quietly grew above their heads. It never carried prisoners over the river, but perhaps that unfinished flight explains why the story remains so powerful. The glider represents an escape that failed only because liberation arrived first, and an impossible idea that history never forced to fail.